Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Smoko podcast. My name is Alexis Armstrong, your host. Nice to meet you. The Smoko podcast is a place to highlight and celebrate women working within STEM and trade occupations. So please tune in, take a break, join us. We're on Smoko. And today is a very exciting day because we are joined by the living legend herself, Dr. Reva Bond, who is the first female dean in the School of Construction at SAIT, which is the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology, which is one of the best technical and vocational schools in Canada. And she was the first female dean. So really let that sink in. That's a huge feat. And it's an incredible honor to have you on the show today. She has a multidisciplinary career in hospitality, tourism, manufacturing, healthcare, and industrial construction. She has managed apprenticeships, diploma, applied degree, and degree programs within the School of Construction, School of Manufacturing and Automation, and the School of Transportation within SAIT. She's also been an executive advisor of the Women in Trades and Technology, which is WIT, which is a program we're going to talk about a little bit later. Dr. Reva Bond has really done it all, and I can't wait to speak with her about her experience, her background in construction, mentorship, and working in higher education, and also her research because she just finished her EDD, where she looked at understanding complexity leadership theory and increasing female participation in non-traditional careers. So again, it's an honor to have you on the show, and thank you so much for coming up today.
I'm blown away with your introduction. I'm like looking for someone else to come talk with you. It sounds exciting.
It is exciting, and that's you. It's crazy. When I was doing this research, things kept on coming up, and I was like, oh my goodness. And I think that kind of goes into this first question. I was like, is this first question big enough? Does this give it with a resume like this? How do I approach this first question? Because the first question is really understanding your career and your pathway of how you became the first dean in the School of Construction. It's probably a small question, but how did you came to work in the construction industry, and how did you fall in love with this field and come to work in higher education in this career path?
Awesome. So I am the youngest of 6 children, a farmer's
Wow.
daughter. I have 4 brothers, and my brothers were in the barn and in the fields and had dirt bikes, and I didn't. I
Mhm.
cooked and cleaned and read books in the house.
Wow.
And as I reflect back, it was very female and male traditional roles. And so construction wasn't on my radar. And in fact, I probably, if I'd been given opportunities at that age, would have declined them and think that's not for me. I don't have those qualifications. I remember working as a waitress for $4.25 an hour. And my male classmates were working on highways for
Yeah.
$20 an hour.
Yes.
And I was like, they're just holding a stop sign. I'm like clocking steps like mad and sore and tired at the end of the day. How is this fair? But you just accept it because there's female roles and male roles. You don't even really question it at that age. And so I went on a really traditional path. I think my yearbook says I was going to be a dental hygienist. Never got even close to that, but it sounded good, right? You have to put something down on paper. And after my first 2 degrees, I was a family counselor and I was working in research and I was still only making $15 an hour. And I thought,
Goodness.
wow, what? Like I thought I'd made it.
Yeah.
I had it. And so when I landed, I came back out to Alberta in 2004 and just registered with a temp agency and accidentally landed in construction. And the company went from 10 people in an office to over 200 in 6 months. And there was just so many growth
Yeah, so much growth.
opportunities. And if you're curious and if you're willing and you're reliable, those basic characteristics go a really long way in the workplace. And then when I found out that if I wore steel-toed boots and was willing to go to a job site, I could make a lot of money.
Yes.
That was my mission. I was on the project managers and I'm like, I think I could be a real asset. I think I could help out. What do you need?
Amazing.
And that's how it evolved from there. And overnight, pretty much, I doubled my income. So from $15 an hour to 30, and that's life changing.
Complete.
And so that has absolutely stuck with me. And so in this role, I'm really committed and excited to open doors for women. And there's absolutely no reason you should be making that kind of money. And you are actually bring new skills to construction that it's lacking. And so not only will you succeed, you have a niche and you can be your authentic self. We partner with companies that also value that diversity and inclusion and that are safe workplaces. So that bring it full circle, an opportunity came to come into education. I thought, oh, maybe finally all this education I attained will benefit others. So it was the perfect kind of marrying of everything that evolved over the years. It's just a pleasure to be able to give back to construction. And like I said, open those doors to other people that wouldn't have considered the opportunities.
That's a wonderful answer. And thank you so much for walking through it because I think there's so many good things there. One of positioning the trades and construction as financial equity and just the ability to make the same amount and to make what you're deserved other than living on a salary of $15 after receiving higher education and that's all that you can get, right? And then the serendipitous aspect of falling into construction. What was your first role when you first started in construction before you decided that you could pick up steel toes and go to site and say, this is it?
So I just took the first job that came up and it was a receptionist job. And I'm like, I got that. I can do that. And I leveraged the opportunities that came across my desk. So I was the person fielding all the phone calls. So I knew
Wow.
what projects we were
Yeah.
bidding on. I knew what was coming down the pipe. I'm the one who received the drawings that had to get stamped, that created the bid, that landed us the jobs. So I just kept asking a lot of questions and inserting myself where I knew I could add value. It wasn't long. Like there is a need for talent in the construction industry. And it's a bit of a cliche. Everyone's talking about just be curious and then it'll all come out. But I have to thank that I had mentors in construction that opened doors for me. And that's really important for women, even more so than men. And a lot of my mentors in construction were men that opened doors for me. And if they hadn't, I couldn't have got my foot in the
Yeah.
door. You can't do it alone. You need to get the lay of the land, figure out where you can add value and talk to people that will champion for you to get you onto the next project to show others that you do have value.
Yes, everyone's saying the whole thing about curiosity and you hear it over and over again, but it does open doors and just having that tenacity and being able to ask questions, you're testament to it that it can change your life. I also agree that I think you do need mentorship at the same time. I know in mining, I got my start by doing cold calls, which is similar to asking a lot of questions. I just rode elevators all day and I just handed out resumes and that got me into the door, but I had to have someone accept it. I had to have some guy in the office being like, "This kid has no idea what she's talking about. She doesn't even know a rock. Like she's 18 years old, but we're going to give her a chance because she's been riding elevators all day and we've seen her all week, so we might as well give her a job." And that made all the difference in my career and that's how it started. I think you're right. You need both curiosity and then people along the way to help you and give you a shot. One thing that you talked about in your original answer of this full circle moment and going into working in higher education, you've been an academic chair, an associate dean, and now a dean in multiple departments construction, manufacturing, and automation and transportation. What has been the most rewarding aspect of working in higher education?
It's new every day. I had totally incorrect conceived assumptions about education. I thought, okay, I've been working 12-hour days in construction. I'm going to come to education, work my 7.5 hours and go home. It's going to be relaxing. No, I work probably 14 hours a day now. But the most rewarding part of working in education is really seeing people again 5 and 10 years later and
Mm.
hearing how education impacted and improved their lives and what paths they've been on. And they come back and share their stories of success. And then they want to mentor the next group of students.
Oh,
And there are people that you can call
amazing.
upon to be on your industry advisory committees and that sort of thing. I'm still tickled pink when they come back and they're like, Reva. And I'm like, oh my
Oh.
God, you remember me? Like, I'm honored that I got to witness your evolution over those 2 or 4 years in your education. That is just so rewarding.
I could only imagine that, right? That is also such a formative time in people's lives, and they're so
Yeah,
young when they first start and just getting started. What am I interested in? Learning all these new things at the same time, trying to discover their path. So I could see after 10 years of them figuring out their niche and coming back and like geeking out about it, I could see it being really rewarding.
for sure. The student teacher dynamic, independent of age. And so it's really interesting because at SAIT, the average age of our student is 25. So a little bit older than straight out of high school. So for the average age to be 25, we've had students in their 50s and 60s
Oh,
coming back
wow.
and changing careers. And there's still this student teacher dynamic. It's really neat to watch because age is irrelevant. It's about skills, and where are you at and what do you need and what are you going to learn?
That's fantastic. I could also see with that dynamic that age is no factor to this, of this student teacher, but I could also see the teaching going both ways, right?
Yes,
Because like maybe you're learning a new skill or a new technique or changing careers, but they're going to teach you a lot about their old past career and their life lessons as well, which is really cool.
for sure. And I think adult education is absolutely that two-way learning, unlearning, relearning.
Yeah.
And adult learning is so different than high school learning because you've got all of the world experiences in a classroom and you're learning as much from your fellow classmates as you are from your instructor. So it's that two-way dynamic, and especially in applied education like SAIT, where yes, we teach you a bit of theory, but it's really about the doing.
Mm.
How are you going to take these skills now and provide solutions?
It's that like hands-on technical holistic learning, which is really interesting. And maybe diving into that a little bit more, being an educator and working within higher education, do you have a favorite like skill topic or like passion to really lecture on? And if so, why?
I know we're going to talk quite a bit about one of my passions, which
Mm.
is increasing female participation in non traditional careers, because I think that levels the playing field. And financially, but also socially, we can start to destigmatize doctors are males and nurses are female, and all those sort of things that we grew up with that I can already see in my daughters that they don't have those same level of ingrained stigma. But a simple concept that really led me down this whole complexity leadership path. I went to a conference in 2016 and the researchers were talking about paradox. So, paradox is the concept that two opposing forces exist together. And so, the example they were researching was to increase the flow of traffic, you actually have to decrease the speed limits. So, those seem opposing
Yeah.
when you first look at it. But research after research, that was the best solution to increase traffic flow. And so, of course, I always think of the Deerfoot and how it could benefit. But, anyways, and so fast forward as a manager and as a leader,
Yeah.
there's so much frustration and paradox daily in everything you're doing. You've got your executive that got their goals and desires. Then you've got the realities of the workforce, and you're in between those opposing forces trying to just get things done and connect. So, paradox, that concept, when I realized, oh, this just is like
Mm.
both are going to exist, both are going to pull me in two different directions. And that is the role. That's my job, is to make sense of it and to keep things moving in one direction. As silly maybe as it sounds, brought so
No,
much peace. And it
not
just
silly.
made sense of the chaos and
Mm.
sense of how come this department doesn't know what this department's doing? You're always stuck in the middle. And so trying just taking away any positive feelings or negative feelings about all those oppositions that you encounter every day and just neutralizing it and just saying, okay, it is. And when you can release yourself of trying to label everything as good or bad, positive or negative, you can just step back and problem solve in a different way with a new level of calmness that helps you really analyze and look at things and reach out maybe to people you wouldn't have otherwise, ask questions and move forward.
I already feel at peace with just that idea of paradox. I could completely understand that it gives you that anchor point and that de-stress effect of all of a sudden it doesn't have to be good, it doesn't have to be bad, it just is what it is. They both exist. And it gives you from that neutral point, you can work on anything in a more easy way to do it, right? It's far easier to get a solution because all of a sudden it doesn't matter. You're not in conflict. It's okay that two things exist. I feel like that's a wonderful mindset and framework. And I could see it being extremely peaceful, especially if you're in leadership and in higher education. I bet you instantly like woosad at that conference to be like, oh my God, thank you so much for teaching me something that I'm going to take with me throughout my education.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And the theory kind of relabels conflict as creative tension.
Oh,
And
okay.
so in order to enter a collaborative or innovative space, there has to be some tension. Because otherwise, why are you problem solving? Why are you trying to challenge the status quo? And so creative tension obviously just sounds way better than conflict.
Yes.
And so when you start from a different starting point,
Mm.
it matters. It makes a difference and it facilitates different dialogue.
I feel like it takes away ego. Conflict is really ego, and you're one opposing force is trying to win against another opposing force. This is more solutions based. It just sounds like you're trying to find a solution to that tension other than trying to win or dominate an idea. That's very cool. And one other aspect of your time at SAIT and your tenure at SAIT is you've been heavily involved in the community and mentorship. And I know that's something that's really important to you. Could you speak to the SAIT program WIT, which is Women in Trades and Technology, because this is your passion about increasing female participation within non traditional roles? And you're an executive advisor within this program. For people maybe unaware, could you speak to the program's mission and describe what the program is?
So, Women in Trades and Technology, we endeavored to be inclusive from the get go. And so we actually looked at the population of our campus and how it's gender segregated. And so in the School of Health and Public Safety, I believe our female enrollment's about 90%
Oh, wow.
versus School of Transportation, our female enrollment is less than 1%. I had to round up to get to
Wow.
1%.
Is that one person or two people
Yeah.
basically in the entire
Yeah.
school?
In a
Wow.
whole year, in a whole year. So
Oh,
imagine
goodness.
walking down the hallways and being in those classrooms and you are the
No,
one.
I
It's
couldn't.
not inclusive, right? That's impacting your learning, your ability to absorb skill,
Your
all of it,
anxiety, everything. I would be
all
a
of it.
walking nerve.
That really brought to my attention the importance of, okay, how do we support and start to change the tide? Because if we aren't even getting women in education in these sectors, how are they going to get into the workforce? And how are we finally going to move the needle? Women in trades is at 5%. It's been 5% for 25 years. This is absolutely a complex problem, which again supported me going down the path of complexity leadership theory to think about like, how could we start to really move the needle in a meaningful way? So, Women in Trades and Technology, it started in 2015, and a few female trades instructors were just having coffees with their
Mhm.
female apprentices and just that really informal mentorship and support and letting them know you're not the one.
Uh,
You might be the one in that classroom, but hey, we're all here on
Yeah.
campus for you. So just that level of support. And then from there, we've expanded to we have a number of industry members. We have a newsletter. We have a formal mentorship program in the fall that is a group mentorship program. So a group of students can get together and learn about a company and all the different
Wow.
roles. And then in the winter, we do a one on one. And so we try to pair folks with their career aspirations, values. And time again, our mentors feel like they're getting more value from interacting and mentoring than the mentee maybe even does. And I know that
Yeah.
as myself, like mentoring is so fulfilling. Who doesn't love to like impart their story and be like, oh, I think I could connect you to this person. This is what happened to me, but don't do that. Learn from that and do this other thing. So that's at the heart of Women in Trades and Technology at SAIT. And even our 2-year diplomas, technology fields, engineering technology, some of our programs, again, 5%, 10% women. And we have some technologies that are more a 50-50 balance.
Mm.
And so when I look at that, it's because there's female faculty.
Yeah,
It's a no
completely.
brainer. Like women need to see themselves in these jobs, in these careers. And so we need to be those role models. And so we need to be visible. And so I'm happy to say we have hired more female trades instructors over the years. Unfortunately, there's still the one
Yeah.
in many programs, and that's
Yes.
not enough. But it's a start. We're moving in the right direction. One thing a really neat experience we did with the auto body students. They're a class of 16, and there was 3 women in 4th period auto body training. And typically, there had never been any in 4th
Wow.
period.
And there was three.
And
Yeah.
and I was talking to the instructors, and I'm like, "Why? How?" And they're like, "Yeah, they usually drop out after 2nd period." And I'm like, "Is the industry that rough and tough? Why aren't they retaining?" And it was basic biology. Who has babies?
Oh,
We do.
yeah.
And it interrupts your apprenticeship stream. And there's actually no pathway to get back on stream without having to repeat.
Oh my goodness.
So
Basically,
wrong.
no, like that's completely ridiculous. You already have those skills, especially when it's a skill set and apprenticeship to Red Seal pathway. Like that's completely
Definitely.
ridiculous.
Definitely. We worked with this group and we started to talk about inclusion and why did they think this and everything. And the male students had as many stories of bullying or
Mhm.
harassment as the women.
Yeah, I could
And
imagine.
so these women are so brave to come forward, tell your story. And you need to know that you're actually making it better for everybody because of the way things have evolved. And when men are allowed just to be men all by themselves, sometimes it's not a pretty workplace. And for whatever reason, there's some folks that want to protect that. Us being there, women being present and finding that balance makes the workplace better for everybody. I'll share one more story. My friend is in nursing. I met up with her after 20 years. I hadn't seen her. And she goes, "Why are you here again?" I go, "Oh, I'm at this women in trades conference." And I said, "You wouldn't understand." And she's like, "Tell me about it."
Yeah.
And I like my experience, I'm typically the only woman at the table. I'm the only woman on the job site. And she goes, "Oh, I know exactly what you mean." She goes, "When I work a night shift and a male nurse is on my team, it's a better shift."
Wow. I would have never thought of that. I was like, what do you mean? Everyone's a woman in it. But it's a complete reversal of the industry and a complete reversal of that.
So it's about balance.
Yeah.
Men don't lose because we came to participate. You actually have a lot to gain, and vice versa. That's the beauty of it. Again, paradox, that creative tension.
Yeah.
It's not win or lose, it's really actually something new and
Mhm.
better. The more we consider that kind of future, that's where we're going to innovate. That's where things are going to progress.
That's a really beautiful answer, Reva. Thank you so much. I think the entire program, the basic of the program of trying to tackle the disproportionate percentage of female to male students within education is so important because the leaky pipeline is such a thing in industry. One thing that stood out when you were talking about the mentorship aspect of it is you said some of the mentors get more out of it than maybe the mentees. And I could see that being completely true because I could see it being you're talking to a younger self, and this type of
Yeah.
program never existed when you went to school or when I went to school even, which wasn't that long ago. So I would have been so excited to talk to a past younger Alexis to be like, "Okay, this is what you have to do in mining. This is what you have to
Yeah.
learn by. This is, like, what a work camp looks like. This is what, like, Northern Ontario winters look like." Just
Yeah.
little things and mentorships along that pathway. It would have been so beautiful.
For sure. A memory, we had a welding engineering student and she was presenting to some grade 8 girls. The girls were engaged and they were impressed. And she was just a very attractive woman, long nails, everything, and puts on her welding gear and everything and can do it better than or as good as any man can. And the reaction of the teachers was really remarkable because if you think about it, teachers and educators, it's formal education.
Yeah.
And so they only know what they've experienced. And so, of course, that's what gets promoted to our youth as a pathway, right?
Yeah.
Go to university, go do
Mhm.
that. And so we're really missing an opportunity to influence early on, which SAIT does a lot of. We get into high schools. We have a career exploration center for grade eights. We have summer camps, which we're expanding into as young as grade 3.
Amazing.
There's so much we can do. The research tells us that our mental model of genderifying different roles is as young as 5.
Oh my goodness, that's kindergarten. That is insane. I did not know it was that young. Even you were speaking about it growing up that you had very traditional
Definitely.
pathways, right? I think this is probably when we get more into the nitty gritty because this is your specialty is really understanding workplace diversity. And I mean, your research at EED was specialize in understanding leadership and trying to increase the number of women within these non-traditional careers. And one idea was the complexity leadership theory. Could you maybe walk us through what is complexity leadership theory and how is that linked to increasing the number of women within these roles?
I'll be all academic for a second and I'll
Love it.
take us through a few definitions. So, the difference between complexity and complicated,
Okay.
that's really important. So, building an airplane is complicated. Lots of parts, the engine, the windows, all the parts that go together. But developing education is really complex because all the pieces, once they're together, can't be taken apart.
Yeah.
Complicated things are still parts. You could put it together or take it apart, but it's a bit linear. With enough training and whatever, you could tackle a complicated problem. But a complex problem can't be taken apart.
Mm.
You really have to look at it as a whole.
As a linked, like, natural system almost, that, like,
Yes.
one part will interact with another part, and they're intrinsically linked, that if you take away one aspect of it, you're going to affect the other.
And
Okay.
you couldn't even. For the system to keep going, you can't take it apart once
Okay.
it's together. I love what you said about natural. This idea that we're shifting in society from a mechanical view towards an ecological view. We have more in common, and complex problems and issues are more biological
Mm.
than they are mechanical. Complex problems, we always try to like zone in on the one thing. And that way of approaching a problem is really not serving us well. So there is some momentum, there is a shift in thinking. And I see it even happening in construction now. It's this idea that we really treat projects and buildings as very linear. But a building, if we think of it as a human being, as a biological entity living, is a very different viewpoint than
A
complicated
mechanical.
thing that we build.
Yes, yeah, because it is that mechanical viewpoint would be that there is one problem child and you fix that one thing, or you take away that one part, whereas you're right, construction is a living, breathing entity. Every single thing is intrinsically linked.
And I would say mechanical thinking is very short term thinking, and it's got us to where we are now. There's all kinds of environmental issues, gas is expensive, everything that's come and where we are now is a mechanical way of looking at things. But if you take an ecological perspective, and it aligns really well with Indigenous ways of knowing and that whole 7 generation
Mm.
concept, that in our current year, we're just stewards of the earth. If we think about 3 generations behind us, our ancestors, and 3 generations ahead of us, how can we treat this earth
Wow.
in a way
Yeah.
that it's better for our children, grandchildren, great grandchildren? That shifts your thinking right away on how we treat buildings and how we treat road system and all those sort of things, because they're part of the earth. They're not this one and done mechanical thing that we can just dispose of. So if we're just stewarding this earth for a short amount of time, how can we make sure it's in better shape?
I love that long-term thinking, and I like that from conception of a construction project to termination to what after the building is gone. How do you do part management? How you do the full life cycle of it and the full impact in multi-generations? Or even my question to you would be, if you're stuck in this mechanical thinking, which I think probably most of us are, how do you move from mechanical to natural?
So I'm going to throw another set of
Okay.
definitions at you
Please.
to try to tackle that. So collaboration versus cooperation. You hear that buzzword a lot.
Okay.
Collaboration,
Both.
collaboration. So construction is built on cooperation. I've got a decision, you've got a decision, we're going to argue it out, and we might be able to work together where we both get a little bit of what we wanted.
See.
That's construction. But if we were collaborating, I would have an idea and you'd have an idea, but we come into a new space and that just becomes information that morphs and changes, and we come up with something new and better where we
Very
both
cool.
win
Yeah.
even better than our initial
Past
original
step.
positions. So building information modeling,
Okay.
BIM, the software that runs a lot of the design the features of a construction project, the starting point. BIM has the ability to facilitate collaboration. But in our industry, what we're doing still is the architect has a model in one system, the general contractor has a model in another system, and then they just give 2D drawings to the sub trade guy. And
Mm.
so we are not leveraging the collaborative power of a 3D model yet. The conversation I love having is that the software is one piece of it, but our mindset is the other. And so the software isn't going to be the solution until our mindset changes as well,
Yeah.
because we're using this technical solution in a mechanical worldview.
Still. Yes. Yeah.
And everyone's frustrated with the redundancy and the redoing and things not matching up. But we have to change our way of looking at it. That's the future of construction. That's where we start teaching our students right from the beginning. So we're working in BIM and 3D models right from the beginning of their program.
Very cool.
We're looking at project management and design from that collaborative point of view.
That is a complete remodel of the construction industry. I don't know much about construction, but what I do know is that it's an industry filled with vendors and subcontractors, that every single person represents either a different company or organization or a different specialty. And because of that, there's a lot of this traditional conflict. You're trying to win some piece of value or some piece of the pie, and there's not much collaboration. So I feel like this change in mindset will completely change the construction industry. And I love a new technology. I'm a sucker for it. But like anything like 3D model or something new that we can use, I just think is a fantastic thing. I know that this is probably going to be similar to it, or maybe this is a tactic or technique of it. Is another aspect of your research was really understanding the link between inclusivity practices, which I'm sure collaboration is one of them, to increase innovation. Could you walk through the findings, these two findings in this link, and then what are those inclusivity practices?
So there's 6 leadership strategies that really speak to inclusion. And I'll expand on one quite a bit because it was really exciting and changed even my understanding of complexity theory. So enabling leadership is about being in that middle space. So you've got your operational leadership, and that's the rules and regulations. Again, really heavy in construction, code, all those sort of
Yep.
pieces. You've got your entrepreneurial folks that are doing the marketing and making it look pretty and trying to be innovative, new smart
Design.
technologies, all
Yeah.
those sort of things. But enabling leadership, inclusive practice really lives in between those two spaces. One of the findings from my research was about creative tension, and I was looking for conflict. I was asking questions of my participants, trying to uncover conflict to see how they turned conflict into innovation. And what I found was that creative tension isn't a verbal manifestation of conflict. Creative tension is the silence that we don't explore.
Oh, that's an interesting paradox. I wouldn't expect that at all.
Um, how I interviewed folks, I was able to line up their value creation stories. When I was asking questions or about a particular event or incident, I was getting to see it from multiple perspectives. And so, very often, one of the senior leaders would say, "Oh, I presented the plan, everybody agreed, there were no questions, and everything went well."
Mm.
And then I would interview somebody who had been in that meeting, and
Oh, okay.
they would say, "I was
Totally
so
different.
confused. I was so confused. I didn't even know how to ask a question." Somebody else would say, "I didn't trust the people in that room. Like I had a ton of questions, but there's no way I was going to ask them in front of everybody." Somebody else would say, "In a past organization I worked for, this, and this happened to me. And so I learned from that I should not speak up in
Mm.
this current situation." It was amazing how even people's past experiences 10, 15 years
Yeah.
ago
Still
were
influence them.
influencing the action they would take in the meeting of today. And it presented as silence. So that's a very complex, logical pathway to not speak up. And there's no other way to uncover the silence other than for leaders to be brave and ask more questions. And so some of this links to psychological safety. Psychological safety, safe places are a precursor to inclusion. So if we don't create spaces for real dialogue to happen, we aren't truly inclusive and we aren't collaborative and we can't innovate. All of that is linked together. And so from that, that's one thing. What we do in our team is we do a check-in question each
Mm.
before each meeting starts. And so that's just to let everybody take a few minutes and just be your authentic self. Where are you at today? Were the kids late for school and didn't eat breakfast and you got here in 30 seconds before the meeting started? Or did you go for a run, have a great breakfast? You were here an hour early. Just allowing everybody to just even set and where are you at today and create that safe space for people to feel like, okay, now I can contribute. I've put that aside, or I can see the temperature of the room. I know where everybody's at. Now let's really tackle this problem in an honest way with some good discussion and deliberate dialogue. It's about learning and being
Mhm.
curious and improving and seeing, okay, you need this and I need this. And so how could we get both of those? Yeah.
Going back to that holistic natural system. I just think that's such a fantastic finding, and it's so important. Because it wouldn't be exactly what you would think it originally to be like the whole problem is silence.
My
Like,
questions
yeah.
were looking for conflict. And when it was like, it just popped
Yes.
off the page, I was like, oh my God, it's silence.
You expect conflict to be this yelling match and to then find out that the root of conflict is silence and how insidious silence is and what goes into creating that silence, right? Because that could potentially be a shameful event that happened 10, 15 years ago where you were not within a psychologically safe space and you were shamed. And now you're going to completely change your behavior. One thing for inclusivity practices that you could bring forward, something that you said that was really interesting, is that leadership can ask more questions. Because I think that we always ask our
Are there any questions?
Yes, completely. We put all the work on other people other than being like, you know what, I should be curious to the people that I'm presenting to and to my group. I should ask them more questions than expecting them to come to me at all times. And if they don't come to me, then everything's fine. I gave
Yep.
them their chance. They said nothing. We're good. We're going to keep going.
Yep.
That's such a common thing in leadership. So I think that's a very powerful practice that you could put into play.
As a part of silence, I labeled some of the findings as three different types of memory. There was inside memory, outside memory, and absent memory. The study was a big change management effort. So through that, a lot of people had left the organization. And so there was a lot of conflict and silence because the people themselves that would have had the knowledge to contribute to this solving this problem didn't exist. So that was absent memory. Now, the funny thing is, you would think that's all is negative, but it's not because sometimes the absent memory was positive because it created space for innovation. So it wasn't somebody saying, this is the way we've always done it. It was actually like, oh my God, we don't know how we're going to do this. And everybody
Someone
came
new's going
together
to
and
come in.
said, okay, let's figure it out. Okay,
Cool.
we're going to do this. So that's kind of neat. Inside memory was people who had been part of a change experience within the institution in the past, and they brought all that memory with them. And again, it could be good or bad.
Yeah.
So we had a technological rollout a few years ago, and I'll paraphrase, but it was a disaster. Folks that were a part of this change management and they had that memory of that past event kept bringing that past
It's
event
not going to
into
work.
how they
Yeah.
behaved,
Mhm.
skepticism, and that sort of thing. But also, again, so it wasn't all as negative. Some of those same people were determined to make this one better.
Okay.
They're like, I don't want to live that again.
Yeah.
So I'm using that past horrible memory to make sure I do things differently this time. And then the third type of memory was outside memory. And I to it earlier. It was folks that outside of the organization that were
Mhm.
new, but were still bringing memories and experiences with them from their past role, their past organization. If you think about how complex, you've got 10 people now with all these
Completely.
different kinds of memory, and they're not speaking it. So you as a leader need to be asking questions that reveal really where people are at,
Mm.
really being inclusive in order to collaborate, in order to innovate. Really drilling down to where you need to start, it is much sooner than a lot of leaders, managers, change management give people space and time to do.
You're also looking at memory, or I would look at it originally to be like, okay, one person has one type of memory. I bet you every single person has all three types on,
Totally.
on different levels. It's even more complicated with just one individual. And again, it could go positive, negative on either way. That's
Yep.
9 options, right? Like it's just
Yeah.
this walking exponent that's going to increase every single time. And maybe stepping back from an individual aspect, but to an organization is to take these inclusivity practices one step further. If an organization wants to increase the number of women, wants to increase the amount of collaboration, innovation, and diversity within their group, what do you believe that they can do?
We're working on this with intention at our organization. We're bringing to people's awareness those unconscious biases. One obvious one is names. And if you can't pronounce their name, you may go on to the next resume. That's a human tendency that I can think of my past self 15 years ago, I would have been guilty of. If I had 200 resumes in front of me and I couldn't pronounce somebody's name, you go on to the next one. And that's just inappropriate. We're looking at blind ways to review a resume without knowing gender or name. Inclusive practices like who you put on your hiring committee even
Mm.
speaks volumes. I have been on so many hiring committees where it's all white men. And
Yeah.
there's other people on
Yeah.
the team that you should consider putting on that hiring panel because the diversity of perspective is huge when you're discussing those sort of things. So there's small things that every company can do. But again, it's not a silver bullet. There's no one solution.
Inclusivity
And
practice. No, it's not that easy.
so you got to be committed for the ride. You got to be committed to grow and keep learning. I think that's what companies can do is keep learning and keep admitting we did that last year, but now we know better. So now we don't do that anymore.
I think that's also like a testament of something that you just did, that you admitted to be like, yeah, 15 years ago, I probably would have done that. It's inappropriate. But just acknowledging it is extremely powerful because I think that is sometimes when you get silence because it's rooted in shame, right? You don't want to admit to be like, oh, hey, we messed up. And then if an organization can do that of admitting past faults and then learning and growing, I think you're right. I think it will make a huge difference. Maybe this segues us into our next question. But if we're talking about the future of construction in terms of equity, what does this future look like in your ideal mind? And how do you believe that we get closer to this future?
One thing that I've discovered through working in applied education is that where our students are constantly, or our graduates, sorry, are constantly getting feedback, their technical skills are phenomenal.
Mm,
Industry loves their technical
yes.
skills, but their communication skills are lacking. What we often do is we go down a technical solution way, but one depends on the other. What we're really focusing on when we're designing new education, new experiences is human skills and technical skills. And we have to develop both. If you're only developing one, it's not going to meet the test of time and we're not going to change the
Yeah.
construction industry to be more equitable. The construction industry in Canada is about 65% of our GDP. So
Yeah.
all the
It's huge.
different banking, real
Yeah.
estate, land development, all of it, it's huge. It's complex. It's all connected. For us to be more equitable, I think we need to be looking at why we're building a project, why we're designing a project, who we're designing it for, and we need to engage with those people and those stakeholders from the
Mhm.
beginning. There's a new process in construction. I might have the acronym wrong. IDP. So it's about
Okay.
integrated design from the very beginning. And so you get together with the architect, the owner, the subtrades, the contractors at the beginning. So it's a very
Amazing.
slow project at the beginning, but they're finding the cost savings and the time saving once they get to the end, and the product, the building, the project is so much better.
Mm,
IDP is really starting to formulate that human structure around the technical solution. How do we structure the contract differently so that we get all of the stakeholders at the table sooner and really facilitate true collaboration? Because the technical solution didn't give us collaboration. What I've been doing a lot, I have 3 daughters. My interest in this was always like, hey, that's what I went through. I really
yeah.
don't want them to have to go through that. How can I make things better? And I think from an equitable lens, the best thing we can do is start to question our systems and structures. If we look at government, if we look at how our city runs, if we look at most simple processes, they were all designed with a patriarchal lens. But we're 50% of the population. There's a lot of things that we've accepted, but it doesn't work for us.
It wasn't
And when
designed for us.
it wasn't designed for us,
Yeah.
when we provide input, provide feedback, we make it better for everyone in the
Mm.
system. So it's not about women winning. It's not about maybe some of those negative mental models we have of feminism and burning our bras. It's really about this could be a pathway to make things better for everybody.
It's about elevating everyone. It's also about making a system more equitable for the entire population when a system was designed for only 50% of it. Right.
Definitely.
This is going to be our last question. For young women who are maybe just starting within this industry, what would be your advice for them if they're just starting or maybe they're a little bit nervous about working within a non traditional role? What would be your advice to them?
I'm going to offer a paradox.
Okay, love it.
I think absolutely one of the best things you can do early on in your career is be genuinely curious. And that takes a bit of effort because it's not about just asking a lot of questions. It's about recognizing what's for you and what isn't for you. And this was something I lacked immensely in my youth. You need to be patient. Often there's 2, 3, maybe even 4 generations in the workforce. How you are seeing things as this young, bright, fresh, new isn't the point of view of everybody. I encourage you to slow down, be patient. If you're trying to make change, bring people along with you because change is only sustainable if you've brought everyone along with you. It's one thing to have ideas out on the periphery, but you're just going to be out there all alone if you're not bringing people with you. That takes a lot of patience. Those two opposing forces.
Thank you so much for this time. It was so lovely to have you on the podcast. I learned so much. I am blown away by your research, and it is just so interesting to hear. So, thank you so much for coming out today. It was an honor.
Thank you. And I love the podcast. So keep up the great work.
Okay, will do.